After 20 years, my dad finally told me why he left. The answer changed everything I thought I knew about my childhood, my mother, and the man I had spent 2 decades hating. But here's the question that kept me awake for months after learning the truth. If someone you loved lied to you for 20 years to protect themselves, can you ever truly trust them again? I was born in Ohio, in a small town called Riverside, where everyone knew everyone's business. My earliest memories are filled with laughter, birthday parties, and a father who would lift me onto his shoulders so I could touch the ceiling. I remember him teaching me how to tie my shoes, sitting on the front porch with endless patience as I fumbled with the laces over and over again. I remember him reading me bedtime stories every night, doing different voices for every character until I fell asleep laughing. I remember feeling safe and loved, and like nothing bad could ever happen to me as long as he was there. Then, one morning when I was 7 years old, I woke up and he was gone. Just like that. No goodbye. No explanation. No note left behind. Just an empty closet and my mother's red, swollen eyes. Please listen to my story and tell me in the comments section if I was right or wrong, because what I discovered 20 years later made me question everything my mother ever told me. The morning my father disappeared started like any other morning. It was a Tuesday in March. I remember because it was almost my birthday, and I had been counting down the days. I had been asking for a new bicycle, the kind with the racing stripes that all the other kids at school had. My dad had winked at me the week before and said we would see what we could do. I was so excited I could barely sleep. That morning, I woke up early, ran downstairs in my pajamas, and burst into the kitchen expecting to see him at the table with his coffee and newspaper, maybe planning my birthday surprise. Instead, there was only my mother, sitting alone at the table, staring at the wall like she could see right through it. She looked different that day. Her hair was messy. Her eyes were empty. She looked smaller somehow, like she had shrunk overnight. When I asked where Dad was, she didn't look at me right away. She just kept staring at that wall. I asked again, louder this time, thinking maybe she hadn't heard me. Finally, she turned her head slowly and looked at me with those empty eyes. She said he was gone and that he wasn't coming back. The words didn't make sense to me. Gone where? Why wasn't he coming back? When would he be home? I was 7 years old. I didn't understand what gone meant in that context. I kept asking questions, my voice getting higher and more panicked with each one. Where did he go? Did he go to work early? Was he on a trip? When was he coming back? Did I do something wrong? She finally stood up, walked over to me, and knelt down so we were eye to eye. Tears were streaming down her face now, leaving dark streaks of mascara. She told me to stop asking questions. She said Dad had left us, and that was all I needed to know. Then she stood up, walked past me, and went upstairs to her room. I heard the door close. I heard the lock click. And I stood there in the kitchen, alone, trying to understand what had just happened. That was the last time we talked about him for months. Any time I brought him up, my mother would either ignore me or tell me we didn't talk about him anymore. I learned quickly to stop asking. But that didn't stop me from wondering. Every night, I would lie in bed and replay my last memories of him, trying to figure out what I had missed. Had he seemed sad? Had he seemed angry? Had there been any sign that he was planning to leave? I couldn't find any. The night before he left, he had tucked me into bed, like always. He had read me a chapter from my favorite book. He had kissed my forehead and told me he loved me. There had been nothing different, nothing wrong. So why had he left? The days after he left were strange and quiet. Our house felt bigger somehow, like there was too much empty space. My mother moved through it like a ghost, going through the motions of daily life but not really there. She stopped cooking the big dinners we used to have every night. Instead, she would heat up frozen meals or order pizza. She stopped laughing at the TV shows we used to watch together on the couch. She would just sit there, staring at the screen without really seeing it. She stopped tucking me in at night. I would call for her from my bedroom, and she wouldn't come. Eventually, I stopped calling. I would lie in the dark by myself, listening to the house settle, wondering if my dad was lying in the dark somewhere too, thinking about me. I started having nightmares. In them, I would be looking for my dad, searching through endless rooms and hallways, calling his name, but I could never find him. Sometimes I would see him in the distance, but when I ran toward him, he would disappear. I would wake up crying, calling for him, and my mother would sometimes come in. She would sit on the edge of my bed and stroke my hair, but she wouldn't say anything. She wouldn't tell me it was okay or that he was coming back. She would just sit there in silence until I fell back asleep. Those nightmares continued for years. Even now, as an adult, I still have them sometimes. Children always blame themselves when bad things happen, and I was no different. I carried that guilt around like a heavy backpack that I couldn't take off. I convinced myself that if I had been better, he would have stayed. If I had been quieter, cleaner, smarter, funnier, if I had gotten better grades, if I had cleaned my room without being asked, if I had eaten all my vegetables, if I had been a better son. The list of my failures grew longer every day. I started trying to be perfect, thinking that maybe if I was good enough, he would come back. I made my bed every morning with hospital corners. I did my homework without being asked. I never complained or argued. But he didn't come back, and slowly I started to realize that nothing I did was going to bring him back. That realization hurt worse than anything else. School became harder too. Not the actual work, but everything around it. Other kids would talk about their weekend plans with their dads. Fishing trips, baseball games, building tree houses in the backyard, helping with projects in the garage. I had nothing to contribute to those conversations. At first, I tried to lie. I would make up stories about things my dad and I had done, but the lies felt hollow, and eventually I stopped trying. I started eating lunch alone, tucked away in a corner of the cafeteria where no one would bother me. I stopped raising my hand in class, even when I knew the answers. I wanted to be invisible. If no one noticed me, no one would ask about my dad. When Father's Day came around and we had to make cards in class, I sat at my desk with a blank piece of construction paper in front of me while everyone else drew pictures and wrote messages. My teacher, Mrs. Patterson, noticed me sitting there. She came over and knelt beside my desk. She asked if I was okay. I told her I forgot how to spell happy. It was a stupid lie, and I think she knew it was a lie, but she didn't push it. She just gave me a sad smile, patted my shoulder, and moved on to the next student. I spent the rest of that class period staring at the blank paper, hating it, hating Father's Day, hating that I didn't have a dad to make a card for anymore. When the bell rang, I crumpled up the paper and threw it in the trash. As months turned into years, my mother finally started talking about why he left. I was 9 years old when she first told me the story. We were sitting at the kitchen table, eating dinner in silence like we did most nights. Out of nowhere, she put down her fork and said she needed to tell me something about my father. My heart jumped. For a moment, I thought she was going to say he was coming back. Instead, she told me he had left us for another woman. She said he had been seeing someone else, someone from his office, someone younger and prettier and without the responsibilities of a wife and child, someone who could give him the excitement he was looking for. She said he had been planning it for months, maybe even a year, saving money in a secret bank account where she couldn't see it, telling lies about working late when he was really with this other woman, taking phone calls in the garage where I couldn't hear. She said she had suspected something was wrong for a long time, but she had tried to ignore it. She had tried to make things work, but eventually she couldn't ignore it anymore. She had confronted him, and he had admitted everything. Then he had packed his bags and left to be with this other woman. Just like that. No fight for his family, no attempt to fix things. He had just chosen someone else over us. My mother said he was a coward who couldn't face the consequences of his actions. She said he was selfish and cruel and weak. She said we were better off without him. She said a man who could abandon his own child wasn't worth crying over. She said these things with such certainty, such conviction, that I believed every single word. How could I not? She was my mother. She was the one who had stayed. She was the one who woke up every day and made sure I had breakfast and clean clothes and help with my homework. She was the one who came to my school plays and soccer games. She was the one who was there. He was the one who had left. He was the one who had chosen someone else. He was the one who didn't want us anymore. By the time I was 10, I had built a thick wall around any memory of my father. I trained myself not to think about him. When memories would surface, uninvited, I would push them down. I would remind myself that he had abandoned us, that he didn't love us enough to stay, that he was living somewhere with his new family, probably with new kids he actually wanted. The thought made me feel sick, so I stopped thinking it. I convinced myself that I didn't need him. I convinced myself that I didn't miss him. I convinced myself that I was fine. My mother reinforced this whenever his name came up, which was rare. She would remind me of all the birthdays he had missed, all the school plays he hadn't attended, all the soccer games where I had looked into the stands hoping to see him, only to see an empty spot, all the times I had needed a father and he had chosen not to be there. She painted him as a villain in our story, and I accepted that picture without question. It was easier than facing the alternative, which was that maybe I hadn't been worth staying for. Middle school came and went in a blur. I threw myself into sports, particularly basketball. I was good at it, and being good at something felt important. It felt like proof that I was worth something, even if my father hadn't thought so. I made friends who never knew I had a father who left. When people asked about my family, I would give vague answers and change the subject quickly. It became second nature. I learned how to dodge personal questions, how to redirect conversations, how to keep people at arm's length. It was easier than explaining the truth, easier than admitting that my own father had looked at me and decided I wasn't worth staying for, easier than seeing the pity in their eyes. I also threw myself into my grades. I became an excellent student, always aiming for perfect scores. My mother was proud, constantly telling her friends about my achievements. She would say things like, "We did it without him. We proved we didn't need him. Look how well we're doing on our own." I should have felt proud too, but mostly I felt empty. Every achievement felt hollow because there was always that voice in the back of my mind wondering if he knew, if he cared, if he was proud of me. I hated that voice. I hated that I still wanted his approval after everything, but I couldn't make it go away. High school was much the same, just more intense. I got involved in more activities, stayed busy every moment I could. I joined the debate team. I played varsity basketball. I volunteered at the local food bank. Anything to keep my schedule packed, to keep my mind occupied. I dated a girl named Sarah for most of junior year. She was nice, but I never let her get too close. When she started asking about my family, about my childhood, I broke things off. I told her we wanted different things. Really, I just couldn't handle someone getting close enough to see the broken parts of me. I got accepted into several colleges and chose Penn State in Pennsylvania. It was far enough away from Ohio that I could start fresh, but close enough that my mother wouldn't worry too much. My mother cried when I told her, but they were happy tears. She said she was proud of me. She said we had made it through the hard times together. She said we had proved that we were strong enough to survive anything. She never mentioned my father during any of this. It was like he had never existed at all. On graduation day, I walked across that stage and accepted my diploma, and I looked out into the audience at my mother, standing and cheering. For a split second, I imagined what it would have been like if he had been there too. Then I pushed the thought away. He had made his choice. I had made mine. College took me out of Ohio and into Pennsylvania. I studied business administration, thinking it would lead to a stable career and a good life. I made new friends who knew even less about my past than my high school friends had. I became someone different in college, someone who didn't have daddy issues, someone who had moved on, someone who was successful and confident and didn't need anyone. It was all a performance, but I got good at it. So good that sometimes I almost believed it myself. I met Rachel during my junior year at a party I almost didn't go to. My roommate had dragged me there, insisting I needed to socialize more instead of spending every Friday night in the library. Rachel was studying elementary education. She had this way of laughing that made everyone around her smile. She was kind and funny and genuine in a way that most people weren't. We started talking about nothing important, just random things, and somehow hours passed without me noticing. When she asked if she could give me her number, I almost said no. I almost walked away. But something made me stay. Something made me say yes. We started dating a few weeks later. Rachel was different from anyone I had ever known. She came from a big, loud, loving family. 3 siblings, 2 parents who were still married after 30 years, grandparents who lived nearby and came to every family dinner. The first time I went to her house for Sunday dinner, I felt like I had walked into a television show. Everyone was talking over each other, laughing, teasing, hugging. Her father was the kind of dad who gave bear hugs and told terrible jokes. When he hugged Rachel, I saw her face light up with pure, uncomplicated joy, and I felt that sharp pain in my chest, that old familiar ache of missing something I had lost so long ago. I excused myself to the bathroom and stared at my reflection in the mirror until the feeling passed and I could put my mask back on. Rachel never asked directly about my father. She picked up on the fact that I only talked about my mother, but she didn't push. She just accepted it as part of who I was. Looking back, I realize how much patience that must have taken, how many questions she must have swallowed, how much she must have wanted to understand the parts of me I kept locked away. But she waited. She gave me space. And slowly, over months and years, I started to let her in. Not all the way, but further than anyone else had ever gotten. After college, I got a job at a marketing firm in Cleveland. It was a good job with good pay and room for advancement. I moved into a small apartment in a decent neighborhood and started building a life that looked successful from the outside. Clean apartment, nice car, steady job, beautiful girlfriend. On paper, I was doing great. Inside, I still felt like that 7-year-old boy standing in the kitchen, wondering what he had done wrong. But I got better at hiding it. I got better at pretending everything was fine. I called my mother every Sunday without fail. She would tell me about her week, about her job as a nurse at the local hospital, about the neighbors, about anything and everything except my father. We never mentioned him. It was like we had mutually agreed to erase that part of our history. Sometimes, on those phone calls, I would want to ask her about him, want to know if she ever heard from him, want to know if he ever asked about me, but I never did. The words would form in my throat and then die there unspoken. Sometimes I would be driving through Cleveland, and I would pass places that reminded me of him. A park that looked like the one where he taught me to ride a bike, running beside me with his hand on the seat, promising not to let go, then letting go anyway, and watching me pedal on my own for the first time. An ice cream shop that smelled like the one where he would take me on hot summer days, always letting me get 2 scoops even though my mother said 1 was enough. A library with the same quiet, dusty smell as the one where he would take me every Saturday morning, letting me pick out as many books as I could carry. Every time I passed one of these places, I would feel something twist in my stomach, but I would keep driving. I would turn up the radio. I would think about work. I would think about anything except the memories trying to surface. There was no point in dwelling on the past, no point in missing someone who didn't miss me back. I was 26 when I asked Rachel to marry me. We had been together for almost 5 years, and she had stuck with me through all my emotional walls and baggage. She deserved someone better, someone whole, but she loved me anyway. I proposed on a beach in North Carolina during a weekend trip. It wasn't elaborate or fancy, just the two of us in the ocean and a ring I had saved up for months to buy. When she said yes, she cried. So did I, though I pretended it was because of the wind. My mother was thrilled when we told her. She had loved Rachel from the moment they met, always saying Rachel was the best thing that ever happened to me. She was probably right. Planning the wedding became my mother's new obsession. She helped with everything: the flowers, the venue, the catering, the guest list, the invitations. She was more excited than I was, which should have been a red flag, but I didn't see it at the time. When the topic of my father came up, just once during a discussion about the seating chart, she shut it down immediately. Rachel had gently suggested that maybe we should at least try to find him, to let him know I was getting married. My mother's face had gone hard. She said he didn't deserve to know. She said he had given up the right to be part of my life when he walked out. She said inviting him would be a betrayal of everything she had done for me. I agreed with her. I told Rachel to drop it. My father wasn't invited. He wasn't wanted. He was nothing to me. Rachel looked like she wanted to argue, but she didn't. She just squeezed my hand and let it go. I sent out invitations to everyone except him. I didn't even know where he was. I hadn't heard from him in almost 20 years. For all I knew, he could be dead. The thought occurred to me sometimes, usually late at night when I couldn't sleep. What if he was gone? What if I never got answers? What if I spent the rest of my life not knowing why he left? But then I would remind myself that it didn't matter. He had made his choice. Whatever his reasons were, they didn't change the fact that he had abandoned me. They didn't change 20 years of absence. The wedding was beautiful. Rachel looked absolutely stunning in her dress, walking down the aisle toward me with the biggest smile I had ever seen. My mother cried happy tears. My friends gave speeches about how lucky Rachel was to have found me, though I secretly thought it was the other way around. We danced, we laughed, we celebrated. It should have been the happiest day of my life. And it was happy, but there was also this hollow space inside me that I couldn't fill. During the ceremony, I noticed the empty seats on my side of the family. Small family, I had told people. Just me and my mom. No one questioned it. But I felt that emptiness. During the reception, when Rachel danced with her father, I stood on the sidelines watching. Her father spun her around and she threw her head back laughing, and I felt that ache again. That old familiar pain of missing something I couldn't even fully remember anymore. We skipped the traditional father-son dance, obviously. No one mentioned it, no one made it awkward, but in every wedding photo, if you looked closely, you could see the spaces, the gaps where people should have been. Rachel noticed too. I know she did, but she never said anything. She just held my hand a little tighter and smiled a little brighter, trying to fill those gaps with her love. And it helped, it really did, but it couldn't fill them completely. Married life was good, really good. We bought a house in the suburbs, a little 3-bedroom place with a yard and a fence and everything I thought I was supposed to want. We both got promotions at work. We adopted a dog named Charlie. We talked about having kids someday, maybe in a few years once we were more settled. My mother visited often, usually every other weekend. She loved our house, loved Rachel, loved playing with Charlie. She was already making plans to be the kind of grandmother who would spoil her grandchildren rotten. Everything was moving forward exactly as it should. I had built a life without my father, and it was a good life, a stable life. I told myself that I had won, that I had proved him wrong, that I didn't need him then and I definitely didn't need him now. I was successful. I was married. I was happy. Or at least, I was happy enough. Then, 3 months after my 27th birthday, on a random Tuesday afternoon, I got a phone call that changed everything. I was at work, sitting in my office, staring at spreadsheets and trying to care about quarterly projections. My phone rang. Unknown number. I almost sent it to voicemail like I usually did with unknown numbers, but something made me answer. Maybe it was fate. Maybe it was just bad timing. Either way, I picked up. A voice I didn't recognize at first asked if this was me, using my full name. I said yes, already annoyed, thinking it was a telemarketer. There was a long pause on the other end, long enough that I almost hung up. Then the voice said something that made my entire world stop. The voice said it was my father. My hand went numb. The phone nearly slipped from my grip. The room started spinning. I couldn't breathe. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it in my ears. 20 years of silence. And now he was on the phone like it was nothing. Like he had just seen me yesterday. Like he hadn't missed my entire childhood, my graduation, my wedding. Like 20 years was no big deal. I should have hung up. Every instinct told me to hang up, to block the number, to go back to my life and pretend this call never happened. But I didn't. I stayed on the line, frozen, unable to move or speak. He said my name again, softer this time. Asked if I was still there. I managed to say yes, though my voice didn't sound like my own. He said he knew he had no right to call. He said he knew I probably hated him. He said he would understand if I hung up right now and never wanted to hear from him again. But he asked if we could meet. Just once. Just for a little while. He said there were things I needed to know. Things my mother never told me. Things that would explain everything. I felt my anger rising then, breaking through the shock. I told him there was nothing to explain. He had left. He had chosen to leave. He had missed 20 years of my life, and he didn't get to just call up and act like we could have coffee and everything would be fine. I asked him where he had been. Why now? Why, after all this time, did he suddenly care? He was quiet for a moment. Then he said something that stopped me cold. He said he never chose to leave. He said he was forced out. He said my mother made sure he could never come back. He said if I gave him 1 hour, just 1 hour, he would tell me everything. Then I could decide what to believe. I could decide if I never wanted to see him again. But he begged me to give him that 1 hour, to let him tell me his side of the story. I told him he was lying. I told him my mother had told me everything. About the other woman. About him planning to leave for months. About him being a coward who abandoned his family. He said quietly that my mother had told me her version, that there was no other woman, that he had never wanted to leave, that he had spent 20 years living with the pain of losing me. He said he understood that I didn't believe him. He said he wouldn't believe him either if he was in my position. But he asked me to meet him anyway, to hear him out. Then I could make up my own mind. I hung up on him. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold the phone. I felt sick, dizzy, like the floor was tilting under me. I sat there in my office, staring at nothing, trying to process what had just happened. My assistant knocked on my door to ask if I was okay. I told her I was fine, that I just needed a minute. She left, and I called Rachel. She came to my office immediately. She found me sitting at my desk, head in my hands, trying not to have a complete breakdown. She closed the door and knelt beside my chair, asked what was wrong. I told her my father had called. Her eyes went wide. She asked what he wanted. I told her everything he had said. Rachel listened without interrupting. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked me what I was going to do. I said I was going to forget about it. I said he was obviously trying to manipulate me. I said my mother wouldn't lie to me, not about something this big. I said I wasn't going to let him mess with my head after 20 years of silence. Rachel nodded slowly. Then she asked me one question that I couldn't get out of my head. She asked if I was sure, If I was absolutely certain that I knew the whole truth, if there was even a small part of me that wondered if my father might be telling the truth, I wanted to say yes. I wanted to say I was completely sure, but I couldn't, because the truth was, I didn't know. I had only ever heard one side of the story, and now another side existed, and I couldn't unhear it. I didn't tell my mother about the phone call, not right away. I tried to just forget about it and move on, but I couldn't. It was all I could think about. Every conversation with my mother, I would wonder if she was hiding something. Every memory of my childhood, I would question. I started noticing things I had never paid attention to before. The way my mother would tense up if anyone mentioned my father. The way she would quickly change the subject. The way she had never, not once in 20 years, suggested I might want to find him. Most parents whose spouses left would at least acknowledge that the child might want a relationship with the absent parent. But my mother had completely erased him from our lives. At the time, I had thought she was protecting me, but now I wondered if she was protecting herself. 3 days after the initial call, I couldn't take it anymore. I called my father back. He answered on the first ring, like he had been waiting by the phone. I told him I would meet him, once, for 1 hour, and then I never wanted to hear from him again. He agreed immediately, relief evident in his voice. We set a time and place, a coffee shop in Columbus, exactly halfway between Cleveland, where I lived, and Michigan, where he apparently lived now. Neutral ground, a public place. I marked the day on my calendar and tried not to think about it. I failed at that completely. The 2 weeks leading up to the meeting were torture. I couldn't focus at work. I would sit in meetings and realize I hadn't heard a single word anyone said. I couldn't sleep at night. Rachel would wake up at 2, 3 in the morning and find me sitting in the dark living room, staring out the window at nothing. She would sit with me, not saying anything, just being there. She asked several times if I wanted her to come with me to the meeting. I said no. This was something I had to do alone. This was my ghost to face. The night before the meeting, I went through old photo albums that my mother had kept, pictures of me as a kid, pictures of my father holding me when I was a baby, looking down at me with this expression of complete wonder, pictures of him teaching me to walk, crouched down with his arms out, ready to catch me, pictures of him at my birthday parties, always in the background, always smiling, pictures of him pushing me on a swing, building sandcastles with me at the beach, helping me open presents on Christmas morning. I tried to see something in those photos, some hint of a man who would abandon his family, some sign that he was planning to leave. But all I saw was a father who looked happy, a father who looked like he loved his son. It didn't make sense with the story I had been told. Nothing made sense anymore. I arrived at the coffee shop 15 minutes early. I ordered a black coffee that I knew I wouldn't drink and sat at a table in the corner where I could see the door. My leg bounced under the table. My hands wouldn't stop fidgeting. I checked my phone every 30 seconds, even though I knew what time it was. Every time the door opened, my heart would jump into my throat. Then, exactly on time, he walked in. I recognized him immediately, even though he looked older. His hair had gone gray. He had lines around his eyes that hadn't been there before. He looked tired, like he carried a heavy weight. He saw me and stopped in the doorway. For a long moment, neither of us moved. We just stared at each other across the coffee shop. Then he walked over slowly, like he was afraid I might run. He asked if he could sit down. His voice was shaking slightly. I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. He sat across from me and just looked at me for a long moment. His eyes were wet. He said I looked good, that I looked like I had built a good life for myself, that I looked happy. I didn't respond. I couldn't. I just told him he had 1 hour and that he should start talking. He nodded. He took a deep breath, and then he told me everything that would destroy the life I thought I knew. He started at the beginning. He said that when I was born, he was the happiest he had ever been in his life, that he had wanted to be a father more than anything, that those first 7 years of my life were the best years of his life. He said he loved my mother too, at least at first. But as time went on, things changed. She became jealous, paranoid. She would accuse him of looking at other women, of wanting to leave her, of having affairs. None of it was true, he said, but she wouldn't believe him. She would go through his phone, his email, his wallet. She would call his office multiple times a day to make sure he was really there. She would drive by his workplace to check if his car was in the parking lot. It got worse over time. By the time I was 6, she was following him places, making up stories about women he was supposedly seeing, creating scenarios in her head that had no basis in reality. He said he tried everything to reassure her. He suggested marriage counseling. She refused. He tried being completely transparent, letting her check anything she wanted. It wasn't enough. He tried spending more time at home. She said he was only there because he felt guilty. Nothing he did made a difference. And through it all, he said, he stayed because of me, because he loved me and couldn't imagine leaving me. He said he would have endured anything if it meant staying in my life. Then he told me about the night everything fell apart. It was the night before he disappeared. He and my mother had gotten into the worst fight they had ever had. She had found a receipt from a restaurant, a place he had gone for lunch with coworkers. She was convinced he had been there with another woman. He tried to explain. He even offered to call his coworkers to verify. She didn't want to hear it. The fight escalated. She was screaming. He was trying to stay calm, trying not to wake me up. Finally, she told him she wanted a divorce. She wanted him out of the house. He said he refused. He said he wasn't going to leave his son. He said they could separate, figure things out, but he wasn't going anywhere. He would get his own place. They would work out custody, but he would still be in my life. Then my mother did something he never saw coming. She threatened him. She told him that if he didn't leave quietly and never contact us again, she would destroy him. She would file a restraining order. She would go to the police and claim he had been abusive. She would say he had hit her, that he had hurt me. She would make up whatever story she needed to make him look like a monster. And she could make it stick because her brother was a sergeant in the local police department. Her brother who would believe anything she said. Her brother who had never liked my father anyway. My father said he didn't believe her at first. He thought she was bluffing, that she was just angry and would calm down. But then, the next morning, her brother showed up at our house, in uniform, with that authority that comes with a badge. Her brother pulled my father aside, out onto the driveway where I couldn't hear. He told my father that my mother was dead serious, that she had already started building a case against him, that she had photos of bruises she claimed he had caused, though my father had never touched her, that she had been keeping a diary for weeks, documenting supposed abuse, that she had already talked to friends, planting seeds of her story. Her brother told him that if he knew what was good for him, he would pack a bag and leave before I woke up. He said if my father tried to fight this, he would lose everything, his job, his reputation, his freedom. But if he left quietly, right now, my mother would drop it. She would let him go without pressing charges. He would lose me, but at least he wouldn't go to jail. At least he wouldn't have to spend the rest of his life labeled as an abuser. My father sat across from me in that coffee shop, tears streaming down his face, and told me it was the worst choice he had ever had to make. Fight and lose everything, possibly go to jail, definitely lose me. Or leave quietly and hope that someday, when I was old enough, I might come looking for answers. He chose to leave. He said it was the most cowardly thing he had ever done, and he had hated himself for it every day since. But he thought it was the only way to protect me from being used as a weapon in a war he couldn't win. He packed a bag while I was still asleep. He stood in my bedroom doorway and watched me sleeping. He said he wanted to wake me up, wanted to explain, wanted to hold me one more time, but he couldn't risk it. If I woke up, I would cry. My mother would hear. The whole thing would blow up. So he just stood there, memorizing my face, and then he left. He got in his car and drove away from the only thing that mattered to him, away from me. He said the first few months were the hardest. He moved to Michigan, to a town where nobody knew him. He got a job at a manufacturing plant, nothing like the office job he had before, but it paid the bills. He lived in a tiny apartment with barely any furniture. He said he would sit there at night, in the dark, wondering what I was doing, if I was asking about him, if I missed him, if my mother was telling me lies about why he left. He wanted to call so badly, wanted to show up at my school, wanted to fight for me, but he was terrified. Terrified that my mother would follow through on her threats, terrified that she would poison me against him even more, so he stayed away. He said it felt like dying slowly, losing me piece by piece with every day that passed. I sat there, listening to all of this, and I didn't know what to feel. Anger, confusion, disbelief. Part of me wanted to call him a liar, to stand up and walk out. But another part of me, a part I didn't want to acknowledge, heard truth in his words, because little things started clicking into place, things I had never questioned before. The way my mother had always controlled the narrative about him, never letting me ask questions, never suggesting I might want to find him when I got older. Most divorced parents at least acknowledge that the other parent exists, but my mother had completely erased him, like he had never been part of our lives at all. I remembered how my uncle, my mother's brother, had been around so much after my father left, always helping, always there. At the time, I thought he was just being a good brother, helping his sister through a hard time. But now I wondered, had he been there to make sure my father didn't come back? To make sure the story stayed consistent? I remembered one time, when I was about 10, I had asked my mother if we could try to find my father, just to know where he was. She had gotten so angry, angrier than I had ever seen her. She told me if I ever mentioned his name again, she would send me to live with my grandmother. I had been terrified and never asked again. At the time, I thought she was just hurt, but now that reaction seemed extreme, almost like she was scared of what might happen if I found him. I asked my father why he was telling me this now. Why not years ago? Why wait 20 years? He wiped his eyes and told me he had been sick. Nothing terminal, but serious enough to make him think about mortality. A heart attack, mild but scary. He was only 53, but it made him realize he was running out of time. He said he couldn't die knowing I thought he had abandoned me. He couldn't die knowing I hated him for something he didn't do. He said he didn't expect me to forgive him. He didn't expect me to want a relationship with him. He just needed me to know the truth. He needed me to know that he had loved me then, and he loved me now. That leaving me was the worst thing that ever happened to him. That not a single day had gone by when he didn't think about me. We sat in that coffee shop for 3 hours, way longer than the 1 hour I had promised him. He told me stories about my childhood that I had forgotten, details that only he would know. The time I had tried to give the dog a haircut and ended up cutting a bald spot on his back. The time I had insisted on wearing my Halloween costume to church, and he had to carry me out when I started making ghost noises during the sermon. The time I had lost my favorite stuffed animal and he had driven all over town looking for it, finally finding it at a restaurant we had eaten at 3 days before. He remembered everything, every detail, every moment. He had carried those memories with him for 20 years, holding on to them like treasures because they were all he had left of me. When we finally left the coffee shop, the sun was starting to set. My father walked me to my car. He asked if he could see me again. I said I didn't know. I said I needed time to process everything he had told me. He said he understood. He gave me his phone number, his address in Michigan, his email. He said I could reach out whenever I was ready. or never. It was completely up to me. Then he did something I didn't expect. He hugged me. Not a quick, awkward hug, but a real one. The kind of hug a father gives his son. His whole body was shaking. I stood there, stiff and uncertain, not knowing how to respond. It had been 20 years since my father had hugged me. I had forgotten what it felt like. When he pulled away, he looked at me one more time. He said he was proud of me, proud of the man I had become, proud that I had built a good life. Then he got in his car and drove away, and I stood there in the parking lot, watching his taillights disappear. I sat in my car for a long time before I could drive. My hands were shaking. My mind was racing. Everything I thought I knew about my childhood, about my mother, about my father, had been turned upside down. I didn't know what was true anymore. I didn't know who to believe. Part of me still wanted to believe my mother. She had been there. She had raised me. She had sacrificed for me. But another part of me couldn't ignore what my father had said. It made too much sense. It explained too many things that had never quite added up. I drove home in a daze. It was late when I got back, almost 9 at night. Rachel was waiting for me, worried because I had been gone so long. She took one look at my face and knew something major had happened. We sat on the couch and I told her everything. Every word my father had said, every detail, every claim. She listened without interrupting, her hand in mine. When I finished, she was quiet for a long moment. Then she asked what I was going to do. I said I didn't know, but I knew I couldn't keep this to myself. I had to talk to my mother. I had to hear her side. I had to know if what my father said was true. Rachel said she understood. She asked if I wanted her to come with me. I said no. This was something I had to do alone. I didn't sleep that night. I lay in bed next to Rachel, staring at the ceiling, replaying everything in my mind. The stories my mother had told me, the stories my father had told me, trying to figure out which version was real. By the time the sun came up, I had made my decision. I was going to confront my mother. I was going to get the truth, no matter how much it hurt. Now this is where I did something that I want you to advise me if I was right or wrong. I decided to confront my mother immediately, not gently, not carefully, but directly and without warning. I didn't want to give her time to prepare a story. I didn't want to give her a chance to build her defenses. I wanted the raw truth. So I drove to her house the next morning without calling first. It was a Saturday. I knew she would be home. I knocked on the door, and she answered in her bathrobe, surprised to see me. She smiled and asked if everything was okay. She said it was so early and I usually called before coming over. I told her to sit down. I said we needed to talk. The smile faded from her face. She asked what was wrong. I told her to just sit down. We sat in her living room, the same living room where I had spent my childhood, the same couch where we used to watch TV together, the same coffee table where I used to do my homework, but everything felt different now, foreign, like I was seeing it all for the first time. I looked at my mother, really looked at her, and told her I had met with my father. I watched the color drain from her face. Her mouth opened, but no sound came out. She gripped the armrest of her chair like she might fall over. I didn't give her time to recover. I told her everything he had said, the jealousy, the paranoia, the accusations, the fight, the threats, the ultimatum, her brother showing up in uniform, the fake diary of abuse, the photos of bruises she had given herself, all of it. I laid it all out, watching her face as I spoke, watching the shock turn to fear, turn to something I couldn't quite read. When I finished, there was a long, terrible silence. My mother stared at me like I had just slapped her. Then she looked down at her hands. I asked her if it was true. My voice was shaking. I realized I was crying. I asked her again, louder this time. Was it true? Did she make him leave? Did she threaten him? Did she lie to me for 20 years? She didn't answer right away. She sat there, silent, her hands twisting in her lap. Finally, she looked up at me, and she said yes. Just like that. Yes, it was true. All of it. I felt like I couldn't breathe. Even though I had suspected it, even though my father's story had made sense, some part of me had still hoped it wasn't true. Had still hoped my mother would have an explanation, would tell me it was all a misunderstanding. But she didn't. She just sat there and admitted it. She said yes, like it was the most normal thing in the world, like she had just confirmed what we were having for dinner, not that she had destroyed my relationship with my father for 20 years. I asked her how. How could she do that? How could she take my father away from me? How could she let me spend my entire childhood thinking he had abandoned me? How could she let me hate him for something he didn't do? She didn't answer at first. She just kept staring at her hands. Then she said she did what she had to do. She said she was protecting me. I almost laughed at that. It came out bitter and harsh. I asked her, protecting me from what? From a father who loved me? From a father who wanted to be in my life? She said she was protecting me from a man who would have left eventually anyway. She said she was protecting me from getting hurt worse down the road. I told her that didn't make any sense. I told her she had no right to make that choice for me. She said she had every right. She was my mother. It was her job to protect me. I asked her if she ever felt guilty, if she ever regretted it, if she ever thought about what she had done to me, to him, to our family. She said, of course she felt guilty. She said it haunted her. But she said she would do it again if she had to, because in her mind, she had done the right thing. She had kept me safe. She had kept our family together, even if it was just the two of us. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. She had rewritten history in her own mind. She had convinced herself that she was the victim, that she had been justified, that forcing my father out of my life was somehow an act of love. I asked her about the restraining order she threatened, the fake diary, the photos of bruises. She said she never actually filed anything. She just needed him to believe she would. She needed him scared enough to leave without a fight. I asked if she realized what that meant. She had bluffed. She had gambled with my relationship with my father, and she had won. He had left, and she had never told me the truth. I asked about her brother, about my uncle who I had loved and trusted. She said he had helped her. He had agreed that it was better for everyone if my father just disappeared quietly. They had planned it together. He had shown up that morning in uniform to scare my father into leaving, and it had worked. I felt sick. My uncle, who had been at every birthday party, every soccer game, every school play after my father left. My uncle, who had taken me fishing and taught me to change a tire and given me advice about girls. He had known the whole time. He had been part of the lie, and neither of them had ever felt bad enough about it to tell me the truth. I stood up. I told her I didn't know who she was anymore. The woman I thought I knew, the woman who had raised me, would never have done something so cruel. She stood up too, reaching for me. She said I didn't understand. She said I was too young to know what their marriage had been like. She said there were things about my father I didn't know. I stepped back from her. I told her that was the problem. There were things I didn't know because she had lied to me my entire life. She had stolen 20 years from both of us. She had let me grow up thinking my father didn't love me. Let me spend my whole life feeling abandoned and unwanted. And for what? Because she was jealous? Because she was paranoid? Because she wanted to punish him for leaving her? My mother started crying then. Real, ugly crying. She said she had done her best. She said she had raised me alone and sacrificed everything for me. She said she had worked double shifts to keep a roof over our heads. She said she had been there for every moment of my life. She said I owed her something for that. I told her I didn't owe her anything. Not anymore. She had lied to me, manipulated me, used me as a weapon against my father. Everything she had done for me was built on that lie. Every sacrifice was tainted by it. I told her I needed time away from her, time to figure out what this meant, time to decide if I could ever forgive her for what she had done. She begged me not to leave angry. She said we could work this out. We could talk about it. We could go to therapy. We could fix this. I told her there was nothing to fix. She had made her choices 20 years ago. Now I was making mine. She grabbed my arm as I turned to leave. She said she loved me. She said everything she did was because she loved me. I pulled my arm away. I told her love doesn't look like this. Love doesn't manipulate and lie and destroy. I told her I didn't know when I would be ready to see her again. Maybe next week, maybe next year, maybe never. Then I walked out. I heard her crying behind me, calling my name, but I didn't turn around. I got in my car and drove away. I called my father from the parking lot of a random grocery store. I had pulled over because my hands were shaking too much to drive safely. When he answered, I told him I had talked to my mother. I told him she had admitted everything. There was a long silence on the other end. Then I heard him take a shaky breath. He said he was sorry that I had to learn the truth this way. Sorry that it hurt so much. Sorry that he hadn't fought harder for me 20 years ago. I told him it wasn't his fault. I told him I understood why he had left. I told him I didn't blame him anymore. There was another silence. Then he started crying. Actually crying. He said he had waited 20 years to hear me say that. 20 years of carrying the guilt of leaving me. 20 years of wondering if I would ever understand. I told him I wanted to see him again. I wanted to get to know him. I wanted to have the relationship we should have had all along. He said he would like that more than anything. We made plans to meet the following weekend. This time I told him I was bringing Rachel. I wanted her to meet him. I wanted him to meet the woman I had married. I wanted to start building something new from the ruins of what we had lost. The next few months were the strangest of my life. I saw my father regularly. At first it was just coffee or lunch, short meetings in public places. We were like strangers trying to get to know each other, because that's what we were. 20 years is a lifetime. We had to learn everything about each other from scratch. He told me about his life in Michigan, his job at the plant where he worked as a supervisor now, his small house that he had bought a few years ago, the few friends he had made, the quiet, lonely life he had built in my absence. I told him about my life too, about college and my job and Rachel and our house and our dog, about the life I had built, thinking he didn't care. We didn't talk much about the past at first. It was too painful for both of us. Too many years we couldn't get back. Too many moments we had missed. Instead, we focused on the present, on who we were now, on building something new. Rachel met him 3 weeks after my confrontation with my mother. We had dinner at a nice restaurant in Columbus, halfway between our two worlds again. I was nervous, more nervous than I had been meeting him myself, because Rachel's opinion mattered. If she didn't like him, if she sensed something off about him, I would have to reconsider everything. But within 5 minutes of meeting him, she was smiling. He asked her about her work as a teacher, about how we met, about our house and our plans. He was genuinely interested, genuinely kind. At one point, he asked if he could see our wedding photos. I had brought some on my phone, not knowing if he would want to see them. He looked through them slowly, his eyes getting wet. He stopped at one photo of me and Rachel at the altar, mid-vow. He stared at it for a long time. Then he said I looked so happy, that he was glad I had found someone who made me happy, that he wished he could have been there. Rachel reached across the table and squeezed his hand. She said she wished he could have been there too. In that moment, watching my wife and my father connect, I felt something break open inside me. Something that had been locked up for 20 years. As the weeks turned into months, our relationship grew stronger. We moved from coffee dates to longer visits. He started coming to Cleveland to visit us. Rachel and I drove to Michigan to see his house. It was small but comfortable, neat. There were photos on the walls, mostly of me as a child, photos I didn't even know existed. He had kept them all these years, the only pieces of me he had left. We went to baseball games together, something we used to do when I was little. We talked on the phone several times a week. It was still awkward sometimes. There were still moments when we didn't know what to say to each other, but it was getting easier. We were building something. It wasn't the relationship we should have had. We couldn't get those 20 years back, but it was real. It was honest, and it was ours. My father asked about my mother sometimes. Not often, but occasionally. He would ask if I had talked to her, if she was okay. I appreciated that he still cared enough to ask, even after everything she had done to him. I told him the truth, that I hadn't seen her, that we had talked on the phone a few times, short conversations that were polite but distant, that I didn't know when I would be ready to forgive her. He said he understood. He said forgiveness was a process, that I shouldn't rush it. But he also said, gently, that holding on to anger would only hurt me in the end. That my mother had made terrible choices, but she was still my mother. I knew he was right. But knowing something and feeling it are two different things. I didn't talk to my mother for 6 months after that confrontation. She called regularly. She texted. She left voicemails, long ones where she would apologize and cry and beg me to call her back. Short ones where she would just say she loved me and hoped I was okay. I listened to some of them, deleted others without listening. I wasn't ready. Every time I thought about her, I felt this mix of anger and betrayal and sadness that I didn't know how to process. She had been my whole world growing up, my rock, my hero, the person I trusted more than anyone, and now I knew it had all been built on a lie. Every moment of my childhood was tainted by what she had done. Every sacrifice she made was shadowed by the truth that she had stolen my father from me. I didn't know how to reconcile the mother I thought I knew with the woman who had done such a terrible thing. Rachel kept telling me I needed to deal with it eventually, that I couldn't just cut my mother out of my life forever without at least trying to work through it. I knew she was right, but I wasn't ready. Then, one day in early spring, Rachel came home from a doctor's appointment with news that changed everything. She was pregnant. We were going to have a baby. We held each other in the kitchen and cried happy tears. We had been trying for a few months, hoping it would happen, and now it had. We were going to be parents. In that moment of pure joy, my first thought after the excitement was about my father. I couldn't wait to tell him he was going to be a grandfather. My second thought was about my mother, and I realized, standing there with Rachel, that I had to figure out what to do about her, because this baby deserved to know both of its grandparents if that was possible. I called my father first. He answered on the first ring like always. I told him he was going to be a grandfather. There was silence. Then I heard him crying. He said it was the best news he had gotten in 20 years. He said he couldn't wait to meet his grandchild. He asked if he could be involved, if I would let him. I told him, of course. I told him I wanted him to be a big part of this baby's life. I wanted him to have all the moments with my child that he had missed with me. He said that meant everything to him. We talked for over an hour, making plans, talking about the future. When we hung up, I felt happy, lighter than I had felt in months. But I still had to deal with my mother. Rachel brought it up that night. She said that no matter what had happened between me and my mother, our baby deserved to know its grandmother. She said children need as much love as they can get. She said I needed to find a way to forgive, not for my mother's sake, but for my own, for our family, for this baby who would be here in 7 months. I told her I didn't know if I could forgive my mother. Rachel said I didn't have to forgive her completely. I didn't have to forget what she did, but I had to at least try to move forward. She said holding on to this anger was only poisoning me. that it would poison our family if I let it. I knew she was right. As much as I wanted to stay angry, as much as I wanted to punish my mother for what she had done, I couldn't let that darkness touch my child. So I called my mother. It was the first time I had initiated contact since walking out of her house 6 months before. She answered on the first ring, her voice shaky, like she couldn't believe I was calling. I told her we needed to talk. She said yes, immediately, whenever I wanted. I suggested meeting at a coffee shop, neutral ground, a public place where I wouldn't feel trapped. We set a time for that Saturday. When I hung up, my hands were shaking. I didn't know what I was going to say to her. I didn't know if I could sit across from her without all the anger pouring out again. But I had to try. For Rachel, for our baby, for myself. Saturday came too quickly. I arrived at the coffee shop early again, just like I had when meeting my father. I ordered a coffee I wouldn't drink and sat at a table in the corner. When my mother walked in, I barely recognized her. She had lost weight, a lot of weight. Her face looked gaunt. Her eyes had dark circles under them. Her hair, which she had always kept perfectly styled, was pulled back in a messy ponytail. She looked like she had aged 10 years and 6 months. When she saw me, she started crying before she even reached the table. I gestured for her to sit. She sat down across from me, crying quietly, not even trying to hide it. She said she was sorry, over and over. She said she was wrong. She said she should have told me the truth a long time ago. She said she understood if I never forgave her. She said she understood if I hated her. I let her talk. I didn't interrupt. I just let all the words pour out. She said the last 6 months had been the worst of her life, that she had spent every day thinking about what she had done, that she had replayed that morning 20 years ago 1,000 times, wishing she had made different choices. She said she had been so angry at my father for wanting to leave her that she had lost sight of everything else, of what was right, of what was best for me. She had only thought about herself, about her pain, about her need to punish him, and in doing that, she had punished me too. She said she knew that now. She said she had known it for a long time, but had been too proud and too scared to admit it. I asked her if she had ever thought about telling me the truth over the years. She said yes, hundreds of times. Every birthday, every graduation, every big moment in my life. She had thought about pulling me aside and confessing, but she was too afraid of losing me, afraid of me hating her, afraid of admitting what she had done. So she had just kept lying, and the lie had gotten bigger and bigger until it felt impossible to tell the truth. I asked her if she realized what that meant. She had chosen her fear over my right to know my father. She had chosen her pride over my happiness. She nodded. She said she knew. She said it was the worst thing she had ever done, and she would regret it for the rest of her life. I told her about the baby, that Rachel was pregnant. Her face transformed. The guilt and sadness were replaced for a moment with pure joy. She said congratulations. She said she was so happy for us. Then the joy faded and the sadness came back. She asked if she would get to meet the baby. I said I didn't know yet, that Rachel and I were still figuring things out. But I told her that if she wanted any chance of being in our lives, being in this baby's life, she needed to do something first. She said she would do anything. I told her she needed to apologize to my father, face to face, a real apology, not for me, but for him. She had destroyed 20 years of his life. She had kept him from his son. She had let him live with the guilt and pain of thinking I hated him. The least she could do was look him in the eye and take responsibility for what she had done. Her face went pale. She said she didn't know if she could do that. I told her then she couldn't be in our lives. It was that simple. She had 2 choices. She could apologize to my father and start making amends for what she had done, or she could stay out of our lives. She sat there for a long time, not speaking. I could see her wrestling with it, her pride fighting against her desperate need to be part of my life. Finally, she said she would do it, whatever I asked, whatever it took. She said she would apologize to him. I told her I would set it up, that the three of us would meet somewhere neutral, that she would say what she needed to say, and then my father could decide how he wanted to respond. She agreed. Setting up that meeting felt impossible. I called my father and told him what I needed. He was silent for a long moment. Then he said he didn't want to see her. He said there was nothing she could say that would change the past, that seeing her would just open old wounds. I told him I understood, but I also told him I needed this. I needed to see her take full responsibility for what she had done, not just to me, but to him. I needed to see her face the person she had hurt the most. He was quiet again. Then he sighed and said he would do it. For me. Only for me. We agreed to meet at a park, a place none of us had any history with. Neutral ground again, but outside this time, in the open air where it felt less suffocating. The day of the meeting I felt sick to my stomach. Rachel offered to come with me, but I said no. This was something between the three of us, something that had started 20 years ago and needed to end today. I picked up my mother from her house. She was dressed neatly but simply, like she was going to a funeral. Maybe in a way she was, the funeral of the lies she had been living. We drove to the park in silence. Neither of us knew what to say. When we pulled into the parking lot, I saw my father's car already there. He was standing by a picnic table, his hands in his pockets, looking uncomfortable. My mother saw him and stopped walking. For a moment I thought she might turn around and leave, but she took a deep breath and kept walking. We reached the picnic table. My father and mother stood facing each other for the first time in 20 years. The air was thick with tension. You could feel the weight of all that history between them, all that pain, all that anger, all that loss. I stood off to the side, ready to step in if things went wrong. My mother spoke first, her voice shaking. She told my father she was sorry. She said she was sorry for the lies and the threats, and for taking me away from him. She said there was no excuse for what she had done. She said she had been scared and angry and hurt, but none of that justified her actions. She said she had been completely and totally wrong, that she had stolen 20 years from both of us, that she had caused pain that could never be fully healed. She said she didn't expect him to forgive her. She said she wouldn't forgive herself if she were him, but she wanted him to know that she was sorry, truly, deeply sorry. My father stood there, his face unreadable. He didn't say anything for a long moment. The silence stretched out, uncomfortable and heavy. Then he spoke. His voice was calm but firm. He said he didn't forgive her. He said he probably never would. He said what she did was unforgivable. She had used their son as a weapon. She had lied and manipulated and destroyed lives to satisfy her own need for control. He said he had spent 20 years living in a kind of hell, knowing his son was out there somewhere, thinking he had been abandoned. He said there were nights he had considered ending his own life because the pain was too much. He said she had taken everything from him, everything that mattered, and no apology, no matter how sincere, could give that back. My mother was crying now, silent tears streaming down her face. She nodded. She said she understood. She said she deserved his anger and his hatred. My father continued. He said that being said, he appreciated the apology. He said it didn't change the past, but maybe it could change the future. He said for the sake of his grandchild, for the sake of his son, he was willing to be civil. They would never be friends. They would never have a real relationship. But they could exist in the same spaces without tearing each other apart. They could both be in their grandchild's life without making it a war zone. That was as much as he could offer. And it wasn't for her. It was for me. For Rachel. For the baby who deserved better than to grow up in the middle of old conflicts. My mother said thank you. It was barely a whisper. She said she didn't deserve his civility, but she was grateful for it. She said she would respect any boundaries he set. She would never ask for more than he was willing to give. My father nodded, then he turned to me. He said he was doing this for me, but he wanted me to understand that forgiveness wasn't something that could be forced or rushed. He said I needed to work through my own feelings about my mother on my own timeline. He said whatever I decided, whatever relationship I chose to have with her, he would support me. Then he walked back to his car without another word to my mother. I watched him drive away, and I felt like I had just witnessed the closing of a chapter that had been open for too long. My mother and I stood there in the park after he left. She looked broken, smaller than I had ever seen her. She asked if we could talk. I said yes. We sat at the picnic table, and she told me things she had never told me before. She said she had been dealing with anxiety and jealousy issues long before my father left. She said she knew she needed help but had been too proud to get it. She said watching my father walk away that morning 20 years ago had broken something in her, even though she was the one who forced him to go. She said she had spent 2 decades trying to justify what she had done, trying to convince herself she had been right, but deep down she had always known. She had always carried the guilt. She said she was in therapy now, had been for the last 2 months. She was finally dealing with the issues she should have dealt with 20 years ago. She said she couldn't change the past, but she wanted to change herself. She wanted to be better. For me, for herself, for her future grandchild. I told her I appreciated her honesty. I told her I was glad she was getting help. But I also told her that trust was something that had to be earned back slowly. I couldn't just flip a switch and go back to the way things were. She said she understood. She said she would take whatever I was willing to give. If that meant seeing each other once a month for coffee, that was okay. If it meant phone calls every few weeks, that was okay. She would wait as long as it took. I told her we would start slow, very slow, and we would see how it went. She nodded, wiping her tears. Then she asked if she could hug me. I hesitated, but then I said yes. She hugged me tight, holding on like she was afraid I would disappear. I stood there, letting her hold me, and I felt something shift. Not forgiveness, not yet, but maybe the beginning of understanding, maybe the first step toward healing. Over the next several months, I saw both my parents separately, never together except for that one meeting in the park. My relationship with my father continued to grow stronger. He came to doctor appointments with Rachel and me. He helped us paint the nursery. He bought toys and clothes for the baby, getting more excited with each passing week. He talked about all the things he wanted to do with his grandchild, teach them to ride a bike, read them bedtime stories, take them to baseball games. All the things he had done with me, all the things he had missed for 20 years. He was getting a second chance, and he wasn't going to waste it. My relationship with my mother was more complicated. We met for coffee every few weeks. The conversations were careful at first, surface level, but slowly we started going deeper. She told me more about her therapy, about the things she was learning about herself, about the patterns she was working to break. I told her about my life, about Rachel and the pregnancy and my job. We were learning how to be around each other again, learning how to build something new from the wreckage of what had been. It wasn't the relationship we used to have. That was gone, destroyed by her lies. But it was something, a fragile new beginning. Rachel gave birth to our daughter on a cool October morning. We named her Emma Claire. Emma after Rachel's grandmother, Claire after no one in particular. We just liked the name. Both my mother and father were at the hospital, though they stayed in different waiting rooms. When Emma was born, I went out to tell them separately. My father first. When I told him he had a granddaughter, that she was healthy and beautiful and perfect, he broke down crying. He asked if he could see her. I said, of course. I brought him back to the room where Rachel was holding Emma. When he saw her for the first time, he just stood there, frozen. Then he walked over slowly, and Rachel handed her to him. He held his granddaughter and cried. He looked down at her tiny face and said she was perfect. He said she looked like I had looked when I was born. He said he couldn't believe he was getting this chance. To be a grandfather, to be part of a family again. Rachel and I both had tears in our eyes watching him. Then I went to tell my mother. She was in the other waiting room, sitting alone, her hands clasped in her lap. When I told her about Emma, her whole face lit up. The guilt and sadness that had been weighing her down lifted for a moment, and she looked happy, really happy. She asked if she could meet her. I said yes. I brought her to the room. My father had gone to get coffee, so they wouldn't have to be there at the same time. My mother walked over to where Rachel was, now holding Emma. She looked down at her granddaughter, and tears started falling. She asked if she could hold her. Rachel looked at me. I nodded. She handed Emma to my mother. My mother held her so carefully, like she was made of glass. She said she was beautiful. She said she was perfect. She said she was so grateful to get to meet her. She looked at me with tears streaming down her face and said, "Thank you. Thank you for giving her this chance. Thank you for not shutting her out completely." I nodded, not trusting myself to speak. Emma is 3 years old now. She's smart and funny and full of energy. She keeps us running from morning until night, and she knows both her grandparents. She calls my father Papa and my mother Nana. They both love her fiercely. They both spoil her. My father comes to visit every other weekend. He takes Emma to the park. He reads her stories. He plays with her for hours. He gets to do all the things he missed with me, and watching them together makes me happy and sad at the same time. Happy that he gets this. Sad for everything we lost. My mother visits too, though less frequently. Usually once a month. She's more careful, more hesitant. She knows she's on probation. That her place in Emma's life depends on her continuing to respect boundaries and work on herself. She hasn't pushed for more than I'm willing to give, and I appreciate that. Joint family events are still mostly impossible. We tried once at Emma's second birthday party. Having both my parents in the same room was tense. They were polite to each other, civil, but the air was thick with unspoken history. Emma was too young to notice, but everyone else felt it. Rachel and I decided after that to keep things separate for now. Maybe someday we can all be in the same place without the weight of the past crushing down on us. But that day isn't today. For now, separate visits work. It's not ideal, but it's what we can manage. My relationship with my father has grown into something real and solid. We talk several times a week. We see each other regularly. We've built new memories together. We went to a baseball game last month, just the two of us, and it felt easy in a way it never had before. We've found our rhythm. We've learned how to be father and son again, even though we lost so many years. He was there when Emma took her first steps. He was there for her first birthday, her second, her third. He's there. Finally, after 20 years, he's there. And I've learned to appreciate that. Instead of dwelling on the time we lost, we can't get those years back. But we have now. We have the future. And that has to be enough. My relationship with my mother is still healing. I've forgiven her mostly, but I haven't forgotten. There are times when I look at her holding Emma and I think about all the moments my father should have had with me, all the birthdays, all the school events, all the scraped knees and bad dreams and little everyday moments that make up a childhood. My mother stole those from both of us. And while I understand that she was dealing with her own demons, while I understand that she made a terrible mistake born from fear and pain, I can't fully let go of that anger. Maybe I never will. But I'm trying. For Emma's sake, for Rachel's sake, for my own sake. Holding on to anger only poisons the person holding it. I learned that from my father. So I'm choosing, every day, to let a little more of it go. My mother has kept up with therapy. She talks about it sometimes, about the work she's doing. She's learned that her jealousy and need for control came from deep insecurity, from her own childhood trauma that she never dealt with. She said she wishes she had gotten help before she destroyed our family. I told her we can't change the past. All we can do is try to do better now. She's trying. I can see that. Some days are harder than others. Some days I look at her and feel nothing but love, remembering the mother who raised me, who sacrificed for me, who was there every day. Other days I look at her and feel the betrayal all over again, the knowledge that she lied to me for 20 years, that she manipulated me, that she used me as a weapon against my father. Those feelings come in waves, but the waves are getting smaller. The time between them is getting longer. Rachel says, I've grown a lot through all of this. She says, I'm more open now, more willing to be vulnerable, more willing to let people in. She says, watching me rebuild my relationship with my father has been beautiful. She says, watching me work toward forgiveness with my mother has been inspiring. I don't always feel like I'm doing a good job. There are days when the weight of it all feels too heavy. Days when I wonder if I made the right choices. Days when I question everything. But then Emma will climb into my lap and ask Papa to come over, or she'll show me a picture she drew for Nana, and I remember why I'm doing this. I'm breaking the cycle. I'm refusing to let old pain poison the next generation. Emma will grow up knowing both her grandparents. She won't have gaps in her family tree. She won't spend her childhood wondering why someone is missing. That's worth the discomfort. That's worth the hard work. I think a lot about the question I asked at the beginning. If someone you loved lied to you for 20 years to protect themselves, can you ever truly trust them again? I don't know if I have a perfect answer. My mother broke my trust in the most fundamental way. She lied about something that shaped my entire childhood, my entire identity. For years, I defined myself as the kid whose father didn't want him. That shaped how I saw myself, how I interacted with the world, how I built relationships, and it was all based on a lie. Can I ever fully trust her again? I honestly don't know, but I'm learning that maybe trust doesn't have to be all or nothing. Maybe it can be rebuilt in pieces, small moments of honesty, small acts of accountability, small steps towards something better. It won't ever be what it was before, but it can be something new, something different, maybe even something stronger, because it's built on truth instead of lies. My father says he's proud of me for trying to have a relationship with my mother despite everything. He says it would be easy to just cut her out completely, to punish her forever. But that choosing to work toward forgiveness, even when it's hard, even when every instinct says to stay angry, that's strength, that's maturity. I don't always feel strong or mature. Most days I feel like I'm barely holding it together, but I'm trying, and maybe that's all any of us can do. Last week, my father told me something that stuck with me. We were at the park with Emma, watching her play on the swings. He said that losing 20 years with me was the worst thing that ever happened to him. But if he could go back and change it, if he could go back to that morning and fight instead of leaving, he doesn't know if he would. Because fighting might have meant I grew up in the middle of an ugly custody battle. It might have meant I spent my childhood being torn between two parents who hated each other. It might have meant I saw him arrested on false charges, saw him destroyed by my mother's lies. The way it happened was terrible, but at least I had a stable childhood. At least I wasn't traumatized by watching my parents go to war. He said sometimes there are no good choices. Sometimes every option is bad, and you just have to pick the least bad one. He said he made the best choice he could with the information and fear he had at the time. And while he regrets leaving, while he wishes things had been different, he can't spend the rest of his life drowning in regret. He has to focus on now, on the relationship we have, on the time with Emma, on building something good from something broken. I think he's right. We can't change the past. My mother can't undo her lies. My father can't undo his absence. I can't undo 20 years of believing I wasn't wanted. But we can choose what happens next. We can choose to stay broken or to try to heal. We can choose to hold on to anger or to work toward forgiveness. We can choose to repeat old patterns or to break them. I'm choosing to break them. For Emma, for Rachel, for myself, for all of us. This story doesn't have a perfect ending. Real life rarely does. My parents will never be friends. My mother will always carry the guilt of what she did. My father will always carry the pain of what he lost. I will always have that 7-year-old boy inside me who wonders why his dad left. But we're all trying. We're all doing the work. And maybe that's enough. Maybe healing doesn't mean erasing the past. Maybe it just means learning to live with it, learning to move forward despite it, learning to build something new on top of the old foundation, even when that foundation is cracked and broken. Emma asked me last week why Papa and Nana don't come to visit at the same time. She's getting old enough to notice things now, old enough to ask questions. I told her that sometimes grown-ups have complicated feelings about each other, that Papa and Nana both love her very much, but they're more comfortable visiting separately. She accepted that answer for now. But someday she'll ask more questions. Someday she'll want to know the whole story, and when that day comes, I'll tell her the truth. I'll tell her about the lies and the pain and the 20 years we lost, but I'll also tell her about forgiveness and healing and second chances. I'll tell her that people make mistakes, sometimes terrible mistakes, but that doesn't mean they're beyond redemption. I'll tell her that family is complicated and messy and sometimes broken, but it's still worth fighting for. Please tell me in the comments section if I was right or wrong to reconcile with my father after 20 years, because this decision didn't just affect me. It changed everything. It cost me the simple version of my childhood that I had believed in. It shattered my relationship with my mother and forced me to rebuild it from scratch. It meant Emma would grow up with a fractured family dynamic instead of a straightforward one. My mother lost the position of being my only parent, the only hero in my story. My uncle, who was complicit in the lie, hasn't spoken to me in 3 years after I confronted him about his role. Some of my mother's family took her side, saying I was being too harsh, that I should just forgive and forget. They stopped inviting us to family gatherings. Rachel's family has been supportive, but they don't fully understand the weight of it all. And sometimes late at night, I wonder if ignorance would have been easier, if I should have just hung up the phone that day and gone on believing the lie. But then I look at my father's face when he holds Emma, and I know I made the right choice. The truth is hard. The truth is messy. The truth destroyed the simple story I had lived in. But the truth also gave me back my father, and that's something I wouldn't trade for anything.